Welcome to 80K After Hours. I'm Kieran Harris, producer of the show and co-writer of the Happy Birthday song. In today's episode, Rob Wiblin interviews Marcus Davis about Rethink Priorities. Marcus is co-CEO there, in charge of their animal welfare and global health and development research. They cover interventions to help wild animals, aquatic noise, Rethink Priorities strategy, mistakes that RP has made since it was founded, careers in global priorities research, and the most surprising thing Marcus has learned at RP. And if you're interested in hearing about Rob's thoughts on the FTX bankruptcy, head on over to our original podcast feed where he's spoken briefly about his feelings about the whole thing. Okay, here's Rob and Marcus.
Today, I'm speaking with Marcus Davis. Marcus studied at Columbia College Chicago, and since 2015 has been involved in a wide range of projects related to effective altruism, community building, and research, including the local Effective Altruism Network, Effective Altruism Chicago, and then at Charity Science as a project director and research analyst. In 2018, he co-founded Rethink Priorities, which does global priorities research, often in a fairly empirical way. Their reports cover a wide range of topics they think are both neglected and important, including animal welfare, artificial intelligence, climate change, and global health and development, among several others. Today, Marcus is co-CEO of Rethink Priorities, in charge of their animal welfare and global health and development research. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Marcus.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Happy to be here.
Okay, today I hope we'll get to chat more about how Rethink Priorities is growing at a pretty phenomenal pace and how its work is changing over time. But first, as usual, what are you working on at the moment and why do you think it's important?
I'm managing manager, so I'm often not directly involved in any of our research projects. But some of the work we're currently doing now includes finishing up publishing on estimating the number of farmed wild-caught shrimp. That's led by Daniela Waldhorn. Finishing up publishing a number of global health and development research projects we've done on behalf of Open Philanthropy. And among those, perhaps one we'll talk about today is the effectiveness of prizes for innovation. That's led by Jenny Kudamawa and Bruce Tsai.
So I guess, as we'll get to later, Rethink Priorities has been hiring pretty quickly. And I suppose, so now you've added a level of management where you're managing people who then manage individual researchers. How's that transition been?
Surprisingly good. I think before starting Rethink Priorities, I think I had an N of 1, helped start charity entrepreneurship, but there I was very much involved in the projects, doing a lot of research myself. And then as I got more management experience there and then moved to Rethink Priorities, managing people, I don't want to say it came naturally to me because it did not, but it was a smooth transition. And the transition between having one layer of management and having 2 layers of management, I think is actually the biggest leap, where you need to have a good process in place, both for like operational things and for reporting chains, making sure everyone knows this is the way we want to do things here and that those things manifest throughout the organization.
Okay, in a second we'll talk about some of the specific kind of research that, I guess we'll call it RP, I think, going forward. But what sorts of topics and questions, I guess, do you most clearly consider as part of kind of RP's remit or kind of the area of specialization that you're in?
Yeah, Rethink Priorities tries to tackle 3 big questions. So who matters morally? So this might be humans or animals, people in the present or future. How can we best help them counterfactually? And how can we get better at helping them? Our research is used to inform policymakers, philanthropic foundations, and other organizations to improve their decisions, generally to make the world a better place. So with that, that's a pretty broad remit, and naturally a lot of things fall under that umbrella.
Yeah, that makes sense. So at the moment, are you mostly deciding what's research kind of based on what people are approaching you, asking you to do research on? Because I guess you're doing more of a consultation or consulting style work now. Yeah,
so I think there are multiple types of research we do. So when thinking about what type of research people take on, I think there's pretty useful, well, at least I find it useful to use a kind of model where there's 3 different types of things. So it could be foundational driven research. These are the type of things where someone has the general sense that this is an important issue. A lot of scientific work goes this way, but doesn't necessarily have a particular theory of change or a particular end goal in mind. No one directly commissioned it. They just think this is a good idea. I also would add, not just the scientific work often play out this way, but I think pre our hiring in 2018, Rethink Priorities kind of existed on this matter, where Peter and I thought, hey, this is an important topic. We should probably do something on it. Of course, we had other goals too, like figuring out if we were a good fit for doing this type of work. But I think this is like one bucket. In this bucket, I would say Rethink Priorities primarily does not do currently. What we do instead is primarily think tank work or consultancy work. So consultancy stuff, as you mentioned, someone directly commissions this work. They say, hey, we have this question, we have this specific problem. Can you address it? And we try to do our best to like assess it in the manner they see fit and get them to the best solution. And then I think the third category here is think tank stuff where we might have a very explicit theory of change, but no one directly commissioned the project. So this might be stuff where, say, I think our work on interspecies comparisons and moral weight began this way, where we thought this is really important. A lot of players in the space would also think this is important. No one said exactly, I'm going to immediately update on this, or here's the money to do the project. But after talking to important people or talking to key stakeholders, we come to think that this is a good way to influence people's behavior.
Yeah. So you co-founded RP with Peter Waterford. And I guess, have you split into two where I think Peter's in charge of some research topics and you're in charge of others? Can you lay that out?
Yes. Peter is in charge of our long-termism work and our survey stuff, and I oversee our global health and development and animal welfare. So survey stuff is very meta. It actually cuts across a number of domains. So it might be the EA survey itself, which we run, but also some group interacts with us. Hey, we want to run the survey. This would be useful. And also some of the more foundational questions I think I hinted on with think tank stuff where like this might be a really important topic. Survey work might be illuminating here, and we do that. The long-term stuff I think is more explanatory. We have an AI team, AI governance team, and we have a general long-termist team, which is taking on, I guess, just a very broad umbrella, but basically anything that's not AI will fall into their remit in the long-termist space. The split, I should say at the top, is one of convenience. So Peter and I, it's not like we have like strong ideological disagreement about the nature of the work. It's just we have to split the organization somehow, I guess, to run this large of organization. And then secondly, I think Peter, just practically speaking, Peter's day job before starting this was machine learning. So I think it made a lot of sense for him to work on long-termism.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's a little bit similar, I guess, to how OpenPhil has ended up splitting itself, where you've got someone leading the sort of global health and well-being crew, I guess Alex Berger, and then you've got everything else, including long-termism side of it, which is led by Holden, and kind of you've got quite a similar division. And I guess actually over there they have someone else running the animal stuff.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think some of this is also like we work a lot with Open Philanthropy. It's also more convenient. Like if I'm managing 1-2 relationships instead of one relationship, like it's much harder, or we're constantly having to communicate back and forth about, hey, have you talked to so-and-so about what? That type of thing would matter. But like even more practically internally, it's just way easier because the nature of the projects overlap better. And then the nature of the types of researchers you want to hire or the way you want to approach your problems is just going to be different.
Yeah. Okay. I think it would be helpful to kind of lay out some of the range of different questions that RP has looked into over the years, because it is, I think it's one of the things that most struck me and probably would strike other people landing on the website is just the incredible breadth, I guess, of topics that you are all willing to bite off. I think it's fair to say it's quite an eclectic range, of questions that I suppose if someone didn't understand anything about effective altruism, they might find it quite baffling to understand what's the common thread that connects all of these different issues. Yeah, what are maybe some of your some research projects that you've been involved in since it was founded in 2018?
I've been involved in, again, hedging in that I haven't done direct research probably since 2018, really. I've been involved in work on invertebrate sentience, so trying to figure out which features invertebrates have that might be likely to influence the probability that they're sentient. I've been involved in interspecies moral weight, which I just mentioned, which is trying to assess for different animals or for different species, how likely are they have different capacities that would be relevant to assessing how intense their experiences are, how many subjective experience they have moment to moment, and whether they have a unity of consciousness. So assessing those type of things, but I've also been involved in work on wild animal welfare, which I oversee. Will McCullough is our manager on that. But on global health and development, I mentioned some work on prizes we're thinking about, but other projects we've done is on global lead burden, work on scientific capacity in sub-Saharan Africa, work on better weather forecasting. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty wide range. And this is, I guess, not even including the long-termism stuff where we've done everything from forecasting. We're trying to assess how you can do forecasting things or trying to assess what the probability of nuclear war is with Russia in the U.S. or with other countries and how we should shape our actions based on this. So, yeah, I guess that's a pretty wide range of things. But as you said, I think the key factor here is we're trying to much like other effective officers are trying to maximize our return, where we think doing things we think is really counterfactually valuable and doing things where we think, well, not just counterfactually valuable, but in itself high impact.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. So on your homepage, you say the key thing that you're looking for with questions is that they be really important, really consequential, and that also that they be super neglected. And I think that really cuts across all of these different questions. I suppose, especially the neglectedness thing, that many of the topics you're you're biting off are kind of shockingly neglected relative to their seeming importance, at least from a impartial well-being perspective.
Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger things where I think particularly, I think Peter and I used to have a bit of a joke explanation for why we were taking on things was like, someone really should have done this already. So it's like the thesis that like, well, there are a lot of people spending money in the space. In global health and development, it might be hundreds of millions of dollars. And animal welfare is not quite that much. In long-termism, it's definitely grown in the last few years to be hundreds of millions of dollars. And with that type of spending going on, it becomes really important to answer some of these questions. So I think perhaps like one of the ones that really jumps out there again is which species are actually sentient, or how many animals are there? This is even a more fundamental question on farm animals in particular. So we think about, I guess, before we started Rethink Priorities, the biggest estimates people usually had was chickens, right? So chickens, if you're, I guess, unfamiliar, farm chickens, there's like 70 billion slaughtered per year. So that's a huge number, obviously. But pretty reasonable guesses were thinking, well, how many farm fish are there? How many farm shrimp? And it turns out Daniela looked into shrimp, as I mentioned earlier. And there's something like, I guess, if you're listening to this, you should probably sit down. There's something like 10 to 60 trillion wild-caught shrimp slaughtered every year and 320 billion farm shrimp every year. So again, for the wild-caught numbers, that's a ludicrous number, right? Like, it's hard to comprehend that it's like 1,200 wild-caught shrimp slaughtered per year per person on Earth.
Right.
And like this type of question where like before the last few years, no one
had even tried to figure out what the number might be.
Yes, like obviously the probabilities of different species there might be sentient, might be different, and like they might have different capacities, as I talked about. But just fundamentally, just like before you try to assess a problem, you have to like know how big it is. And in the animal welfare space in particular, I think a lot of questions are just like, well, no one's really thought about this yet because animal welfare is only, as a more developed discipline, is probably only, like, I guess, being generous, 20 years old or something like that. Whereas global health and development is decades old. I know similar problems arise with the long-term space where, like, well, just no one's really been thinking about this in the past. So, like, well, everyone's trying to start from scratch. Like, how do you do this?
Totally. Especially with the wild animal, I guess, numbers and consciousness and welfare stuff. I suppose since this kind of got onto the radar a little bit 10 or so years ago, at least when I first started hearing about it regularly, people would say there's nothing really that can be done, or there was a sense that the issue was really untractable and it was very unclear what the next steps would be. But I suppose it is a very natural first thing to do is just collect the extremely basic information. Let's like count the number of animals and let's collect some basic facts about their physiology. It's going to be very hard to build a credible field and seem like serious people who are studying a real issue if even just the very basic facts that one would bring to the table to describe the issue are not established. And it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if wild animal well-being goes on to become a serious thing, which I kind of expect that it probably will, then these numbers are going to be referred to a ton. And the fact that these numbers exist, I think, is going to always be adding substantial credibility to whenever people introduce the topic.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also would say I was referencing animals that are affected directly by humans. But of course, that's not most wild animals. And wild animals would like that 1,200 number would be more like 99,000 or something like that for every wild animal on Earth. So I think it's like a pretty plausible case that wild animals have most of the welfare at any given moment on Earth. And yet, not only do we not have like credible numbers. In this case, I think the global problem is going to be this adds a lot of complexity of like trying to estimate the total number of wild animals. But just fundamentally, for like mostly every species, we know basically nothing about their like day-to-day lives, nothing about their capacities, like basically no evidence on how much of the time of the day do they spend hungry or thirsty or cold or looking for shelter? Like, we just don't know any of those things. So like it's very difficult to assess how you should like do if you wanted to, how you should improve their welfare if you just don't know anything about them. And I think that's kind of the world we face right now. And it's, I guess, one of the reasons why assessing wild welfare is like on our agenda.
Yeah. So on the animal stuff, in prep for this interview, I heard you talk a bit about RP's work on trying to figure out which animals will plausibly be sentient, or at least build a database of different animals and the kind of the characteristics they have, which people might think are plausibly relevant to their kind of standing as moral potential moral patients. So let's talk instead about a different topic, which I haven't heard you talk about, which is the interventions that people might plausibly consider trying to help animals that are kind of outside of the traditional farming system that's been considered. Yeah, what sort? I mean, this is kind of always the thing that people run up against when you talk about wild animals, or I guess animals that are being hunted or caught in the wild, like shrimp in the sea, or rivers, is that people tend to say, well, there's nothing that can be done, so this is this has to be a non-issue. What kinds of things have you found that might plausibly be done?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think in the short run, anything we do, with a few exceptions I might get into here, are going to have some like massive uncertainties. So I'm like going to suggest right now, like I have a great idea that we should like definitely do this thing. It's going to have a positive welfare impact, particularly given, I guess, the things I just said about not knowing much about the welfare of most species. That said, I think there are a couple domains where you might have like a more robust chance if you want to have a positive impact. Now, there's not just like the direct impact of like actually doing the intervention. There's also the theoretical impacts of like finding out, well, this might work in practice. This might lead people to understand that this is a serious thing worth trying. And those type of impacts as well might matter. But just thinking, I guess, narrowly in the short term aspect, like, is this net positive for welfare? Some things that might work are things where humans in particular are already culling animals. So one project we have done this year, led by Holly Elmore, is looking at rodenticides. So just practically speaking, many rodents are killed using poisons that make them internally bleed to death, which seems very bad. Like it takes many hours in some circumstances, sometimes maybe days. So you're thinking, well, if we could just do something, basically, if you're gonna try to control the population, you could use birth control. You could use just something that doesn't do that, like something that isn't that possibly painful or last that long, but something like that, where like you're not actually intervening in the sense of you don't need to, I guess, convince the population that you need to fundamentally change the way you think about things, but you just need to convince them that like on the margin, these type of things might matter. And then that type of welfare impact might be significantly large if you're thinking about going from a position where many animals, possibly millions, are poisoned to death versus having some birth control, which might just have no hedonic effect at all. So that's one type of intervention. Another type of thing you might consider is something where there's disease that's rampant in the population, and it's something we already understand and know how to control. In this case, Kim Cuddington was working on a project for us looking at rabies vaccinations for dogs. So if you're unaware, there are a lot of stray dogs in India, and I think that they already have a, I guess, robust human rabies vaccine campaign. But one of the problems is dogs have rabies, they bite humans. So there's some type of intersection here between the welfare of humans and the welfare of wild animals, where it might just, you can do an intervention that makes rabies deaths, I also don't think are very pleasant. They last several months and can be really painful, but you could say prevent rabies, which would help humans as well. So that type of intervention might work here. Again, I'm not like, for like basically any intervention outside of changing the type of death that's happening, I'm not like confident in the robust positive effects, particularly if you're thinking about long-term effects. But these type of things are worth thinking about or trying and figuring out how you can do them and how you implement them at scale in reality, as opposed to just theoretically sitting back and assessing, well, this might have this impact or this might have that impact. So I think those type of things are worth considering. And then there's the bigger picture thing. So like you might say, well, there's nothing you can do now. And the bigger answer I'd say in response to that is something like, yeah, it might be true, but one of the things we could do is figure out what we should be trying to attempt. So if you try to understand the welfare of these animals, just gather basic facts about what their lives are like. This could help you understand how you should do this, or also implementing things like monitoring systems. So one thing we did last year, intern who's now actually an RA of ours, Hannah McKay, did was looking at how you might use monitoring of wild animal vocalizations to understand their welfare. So this type of thing where like you're not actually necessarily intervening right now, but it might set you up for some time down the line to understand the welfare impacts of different actions.
Interesting. Okay, so the idea would be that you would set up microphones potentially in some habitat, and then I guess you can teach it to recognize calls of distress versus calls of pleasure or neutral calls, and then you can kind of just run a survey using the microphone of how the different animals feel and maybe how their well-being is changing over the year or changing in different conditions. Is that the basic idea?
Yes, that's the basic idea. Of course, in reality, it'd be very complicated. It'd be like machine learning, but the basic idea, yes, that's the premise.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Have you had any reaction to that proposal?
I mean, I don't think we were the originators of this proposal, but as far as I know, not exactly a tremendous amount of, we're going to actually implement this. But I do think this is one of those things where you develop the basic idea, and then you can like refine it and you can approach it. And obviously, thinking about it at the abstract level of you could do this is very different from, okay, and now we're actually going to do this for this particular species in this particular domain. Particularly given, I guess, again, even for something like this, you need to know what the cause of distress are. So like there have to already have been some basic science on the species in question. And if there's not, you have to do that first. And then like a couple of years later, then you can do this type of intervention or this type of monitoring.
Yeah. Another report I saw on your website was about aquatic noise. Could you talk about that? I hadn't heard of this issue before.
Yeah. So aquatic noise is generated in a number of ways. And I think this report was assessing, well, could you reduce this aquatic noise, which could be harmful to animals? It could be everything from like distressing to debilitating, depending on how loud it is. I think some of the sounds are in the plus 100 decibels range. So we're talking like getting closer to like airplane takeoffs, right? So if you're at like close distance to that type of sound, like this could be...
Is this boats or what?
In this case, I mean, sometimes it's boats, but the particular instance I think that report was addressing was looking for like oil. So like if someone's doing
oil exploration.
Yes, oil exploration, where they're looking for, okay, there might be oil off the coast of this country. We want to like find out, and the way you find out is like you drill down into the seabed using, I guess, very large tools that make a lot of noise, and this could be really distressing. One of the biggest problems with assessing whether this is actually good to do is that we just don't know. Again, we don't know very much about the welfare impact of this type of thing on animals. We also don't know very much about how far away animals can detect it from, because we don't know enough about their basic capacities. So this type of thing like could be potentially worth pursuing, but it's also like massively uncertain, like a lot of these things are. In this particular instance, it also is the case that there's some, I guess, much like some of the other interventions, there's you don't actually just have to like argue this purely on welfare grounds. There might be good climate change reasons to care about this, or it might just be like the case that, oh, this is necessary. I think the case study that Chimkis was looking at was understanding historic case where the U.S. was considering this, and they were already had some type of exploration like this plan. So this might just be less duplicative in the first place.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So isn't it super fascinating that because this is so far off of our radar, we could, in principle, be doing something that's incredibly noisy under the sea and deafening animals en masse, and we wouldn't even really ask the question or notice it, or potentially notice it because we're not measuring. We don't tell whether fish or dolphins or whales or smaller animals are becoming deaf because of our behavior. How would we ever tell?
Yeah, this is bad. But I guess one of the things here, of course, is just like alerting people that this is an issue. I think this particular issue is something that the non-EA community has thought about. Just generally speaking.
It has, okay.
Environmentalists have cared about this for a while.
I see.
This is something where like I think we're trying to approach this, from a welfare perspective and looking like what could be causing possible harms that we could possibly prevent. And we come to, kind of like, oh, here's something that some people do already care about that could be useful.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So a whole bunch of research can potentially be repurposed that's been used for environmentalist or conservationist work. I suppose potentially they've been doing work on calls from animals as well in order to tell how many they are and how well they're doing. And then this can all be applied potentially to well-being interventions as well.
I guess I hesitate to say all applied, but some of it definitely
might be. Yeah. Okay. Let's back up and talk about the poisons that kill rodents. What did that report uncover? Are there any alternatives? Are there any suggestions that could be made to people who are killing rodents at the moment?
Yeah. So there are a number of possible changes you can make here. So you could do controlling what I guess humans have often considered pest populations, like just reducing births, which would greatly reduce the need for lethal control means. So you can do this by resource reduction. So this might be containing food waste. You could do it by habitat reduction. So filling in abandoned burrows, filling in cracks that give access to interior spaces, or you could do effective birth control agents, such as there's a birth control agent approved by the FDA called ContraPest, which is designed, I guess, a similar fashion to human birth control in this particular case, because of course they're not humans. You supply bait and they eat the bait, and then that has birth control impacts.
Wow. Okay. You kind of give them the pill, or you provide food that has the pill in it, more or less.
Yes.
Do you recall whether the birth control method was at all cost competitive with these extremely painful poisons?
Presently there's not a similarly cost competitive birth control that's similar to the poisons, and this is one of the reasons why people use poisons. Nonetheless, I do think several localities have already banned some rodenticides that work through anticoagulation. So because they're particularly painful and they have off-target impacts.
I see. Okay, so it's interesting to write a report about this. I guess, that product, where are you hoping that it might end up, and how are you hoping that it might have influence?
Yeah, so I think this is an area where if you talk to localities or certain governments, I think they might be just particularly sympathetic on grounds that this is harmful to the animals relative to something else that might just be, it's more expensive, but it might just be like slightly more expensive, or some other effort they could do, particularly if the only change you're asking is like, instead of using purely some of these methods that might be particularly harmful, you take some efforts to do things like fill in the cracks in your buildings, or do things where you use something like, I think there's that. Yeah, restrict access to food. Or there's another thing, which is, I think, carbon monoxide used in barrels rather than anticoagulants, because once you know what the barrel is, you don't actually have to use the most painful possible method. You could just use something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Do you know if anyone has made use of this report, or has it been cited by anyone who's thinking about these issues in practice?
This is very recent, so cited might be too strong. However, I do believe Holly Elmore gave an interview to, I want to say, Boston's NPR about this topic. And I think they was thinking about these type of things. But I don't know if this is necessarily going to lead to policy change imminently. But I do think that this is an area where I think there might be just like at least somewhat sympathetic public support. This is also something we're investigating, what the public thinks about this type of issue.
Yeah. I mean, I know nothing about pest control. Pest control is a policy issue or a practical matter. I'm guessing, though, might speculate that the conversation in the past, before you have alternatives like this, might go, this is an extremely cruel method of killing mice and rats. And then the farmer will respond and say, well, there's no alternative realistically. And so it just kind of gets shut down because people will accept, well, I guess it's evil but necessary. But if you can point to reports saying, no, there is this other method, it is totally scalable, it's like far better on welfare grounds, then potentially it makes it a lot easier to ban these extremely cruel pest control methods, because you can just say, well, it's a bit more expensive to do this other thing, but it's totally viable.
Yeah, I think that's right. Of course, I guess the proof is when it happens. So
right.
Okay, I'm I guess by nature very skeptical about predicting effects on this type of thing, and while I'm optimistic that some changes like this might be made, particularly if you imagine if the effort required here might be something where instead of thinking about this as a intervention where you're paying up all the costs yourself, you're shifting the cost to maybe a local government, which is doing the intervention for you, then it could in theory even be, I guess, at least modestly cost effective.
Let's maybe push on from these specific reports and talk about Rethink Priorities, how it's set up, its strategy, its potential paths to impact. Yeah, it feels to me like Rethink Priorities has just been changing a ton in the last few years, and it seems to have some pretty big plans for the future. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, we have grown from, I guess, 10 people as of about 2 years ago, actually today-ish, to I think we have 46 permanent staff right now and 12 fellows, with a few additional hires we've made who haven't started yet in the coming months. So we're fully remote. So we coordinate largely on Slack and video calls, and the growth has happened, I think, I guess in chunks, particularly earlier this year, where we hired a round of 25 people, including fellows. This was a lot of work, but I think it went really well. I feel very good about, I guess, where we're currently standing. And I feel that we're in a strong position, I guess, to continue to put out like high quality research and across a wider set of topics than ever before. Yeah.
Wow. Are you the biggest research org in the effective altruism community these days? I guess it's like competitive FTE or full-time equivalent staff, I suppose, to OpenPhil or GiveWell. It's larger than 80,000 hours, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we're somewhere in there. I haven't checked the numbers recently. I think we're in the top 4 for sure. And okay, I think GiveWell has maybe a few more people than we do, and then OpenPhil, I think it's not just has more people than we do; they're also expanding. I think they're going to stay ahead for a while.
Right. Okay. How challenging has it been to hire lots of people? What does the process for finding people look like?
Yeah. So I think, as you might be aware, the space is very competitive in the hiring domain. We don't do, I think, anything novel about recruiting. So we promote, actually, one of our best sources for possible hires is 8,000 hours job board. So we ask people exactly like, where did you find out about this job? And oftentimes that's the case. But yeah,
that's fantastic.
We do that. We promote the job on our Twitter or social media, things like that. But we also do a lot of, I guess, one-on-one outreach. So we try to develop a list of like, okay, this person might be interested in this job, or there might be a good fit. And we do like direct referrals. Like we'd say, hey, if you're interested, you should apply. Directly send emails to them. I think in this past round, we probably sent hundreds of such emails or direct contact through LinkedIn and other channels like this. And we find that's pretty effective at finding people.
Are you hiring kind of specialists who might know something about a particular topic to then go and work on that topic? Like someone who knows something about pest control, perhaps to do a whole lot of work on the animal welfare implications? Or are you hiring almost entirely generalists?
Oh, yeah. So I think this is different across areas, but I think maybe I'm just hedging on that. We typically don't hire to the specificity of a typical report. We may use contractors for that. Actually, a really big project which we worked on over the past year, which maybe we should get to, is more weight work that followed up our prior more weight work. So anyway, the point here is that we've used 18 different people across a number of disciplines. So veterinary science and ecology, entomology, neuroethology, and for those areas, obviously we're looking for like pretty specialized people to do the work. But at a more general level, when we're hiring researchers, typically hiring them more into a particular cause, though it might be the case that we're looking more for, say, someone with some policy background, or we're looking for someone with particular quantitative skills for a particular role. But just generally speaking, we don't have a lot of generalist researchers at RP. People are fit within cause areas.
I see. Yeah, has it been hard to find? I guess you're hiring something like 2 people a month at the moment on average. Has it been hard to find enough people who you feel really, really confident enough in that you do want to hire them?
Surprisingly, no. I think some of it is that, as I said, the space is competitive. I guess one of the positive things is, unlike a couple years ago when we first started, I think we pay reasonably well now. I think this is something true for lots of the EA space. It's not something that, of course, that we've done alone. The space has grown a ton, and I think there's, I guess, better support for doing this type of thing. But yeah, I think the push to reach out to particular people we think are good fits, and then also publish on like relevant job boards, along with being on your job board itself. I think that type of stuff helps a ton here. And then, of course, the filtering process through the hiring, I think we put a lot of effort and time and thought into, and to make sure that we try to find people who like are not just have the requisite skills in the sense of like they have the hard skills, but also have the required, I guess, open-mindedness and skepticism.
Yeah. Has it been a big benefit potentially that being a fully remote team, you can hire people who are interested in doing this kind of work anywhere in the world, and maybe people might be really interested in working for you because there's some other research organizations that only do local hiring. People would have to come into the office, and there's so many folks who realistically just can't pick up and move country or move city in order to take one of those jobs.
Yeah, I think this is a huge pro. So I think the cities with the most RP staff, and depending on how you're counting, is either London or Philadelphia, and I think it's 5 or 6 people. Philadelphia area, like I'm a little bit cheating. There's suburbs I'm counting here, but yeah, that's obviously not most of our organization, and so most people are not in those cities, and we mostly don't have people necessarily living in we have a few people in the Bay Area, a few people obviously in London, but none of the centralization we don't have as much. And on top of this, I would add that we have people working in, I believe, if you include the fellows now, maybe I'm a bit undershooted, so I'll just say at least 11 countries. So I imagine not all of those people could have moved even if we wanted them to. And I think obviously a lot of the staff doing this work find remote work itself appealing. Like even if we had a local office, they find the idea that they could work from home appealing. And I think it's just been a huge boom for our ability to scale. Yeah,
that's fantastic. I mean, I can see the benefits both of having a full office culture and being fully remote, but it's fantastic that there's I guess that there's some range of options, so that people who want to work in an office can potentially go to an organization that does that, and people who want to be fully remote or just live in Sydney or something like that can potentially get a job with you guys. The other big shift, right, has been that you're doing more consultancy work for specific clients. But my impression is that in the past, you were largely doing work with the goal of publishing it and then encouraging people to read it and hoping that it would influence their decisions. But now people are coming to you. Yeah, can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think this transition goes from some of that work we did trying to put it in front of other people was well received. And when that happened, I think there was a push from some people who thought, hey, they could help us answer this question. We don't have the capacity. We don't have, or we, for whatever reason, don't have the desire to do it right now. Could you do this? And we've taken on work in, I guess, a number of areas that's like this. So we have some grants from Openfield where we're working on global health and development, trying to do pretty directly consultancy work with them. And then we also have, I think, some of our animal welfare work with their animal welfare department is very similar in the sense of like, hey, they're interested in X topic. We can help you answer this question. Naturally, I guess one of the downsides about this is I'm being kind of vague, not telling you exactly what we did, because a lot of the work ends up being things that maybe has some private details. That's it. I can say, despite, I guess, the large number of things we published this year, we're actually sitting on quite a large backlog of global health and development reports that we're trying to get out throughout the back part of this year. So I think we've done maybe a dozen or so reports, and maybe 3 of them have been published. So we're going to try to, I guess, get that stuff out there. But the general thrust of doing consultancy work. So if you step back to that original framework I was thinking, where we're trying to answer questions on like which groups are like more relevant, how can you like help them, how can you get better at helping them? Those latter questions I think get very narrow sometimes with a particular consultancy work. So it might be the case that someone says, okay, we're working within this framework. We're going to spend X millions of dollars. Can you help us identify a particular intervention, or we're working within this particular framework. We're thinking about investing more in the topic. We're not really sure. Can you help us? And in those scenarios, I think the return there is like pretty obvious, where someone's just really directly considering spending millions of dollars on this. And if you don't take it on, often no one will. I think there's a very compelling case to work on these things, even with sometimes the inability to say things publicly. But of course, I'm not in this, or Rethink Priorities isn't in this necessarily to only, get our name out there. Trying to generically do the most good we can.
Absolutely. So the situation with some of those reports that were produced for Openfill is that I guess they've gone off to Openfill, but they need to be rejigged before they go on the website, basically. So they need to be reworked for public audience, and hopefully they'll go up later in the year. Yeah,
that's basically the situation. I guess, again, conservatively, a dozen reports or so this year, with several more coming. And then that's just on global health and development. I would also add, even though this isn't necessarily my department, this is true, I think, in the other side of the organization on long-termism, in surveys, in particular in surveys where a lot of stuff we do is like pretty directly commissioned by other groups, often EA meta orgs, looking for help on the messaging or looking for trying to assess what the public thinks about X, Y, or Z. And we do a lot of that type of work, but it just never sees the light of day.
Totally. I guess, you can't talk about all examples of impact or influence that you've had, but what is an example of Rethink Priorities changing the decision of some other actor that you can talk about?
Yeah, so given that caveat that a lot of our most influential actions aren't public, I would say there are a few things that come to mind. So over the last year, Neil Dullahan did some work on assessing a strategy with regard to farm animal welfare in the EU. So he was basically trying to assess, how should we think about this problem? Are there any particular things we're under considering? And as a result of that, I can't be specific about which donors for pretty obvious reasons, but I think this has probably led to probably worth about $1 million or $2 million in expectation in additional giving opportunities. Some of our, on global health and development, some of our early work this year also helped identify some promising opportunities for Openfield to fund things. Again, I want to be a little generic, but I can say, I guess, because I think Jacob Trefethen confirmed it on Twitter, that they have a new global health and R&D role, and he explicitly said we cited some of our Rethink Priorities work in that consideration for that. I think that's one particular place where this comes up, and I think this type of like very specific, this grant changed, we made this hiring decision, like those things are like really important. But it's also, I guess, I also would step back and say, I think probably our biggest impact on the animal welfare space in particular is like the broader shift to like considering the kind of ignore issues of moral weight or invertebrate welfare and saying these type of things are worth taking seriously. And over the last few years, I think grant makers in this space have taken these things more seriously. It feels a little funny to say, because I also have a night job as on the EA Animal Welfare Fund. But I know those people take it seriously, and I think some other grant makers do as well.
Yeah, so many listeners will have heard of charity entrepreneurship, which is this kind of incubation program for new charities. I've done interviews with at least 2 people who've been through that program recently, Vasha Venugopal and Andres Jimenez Sorria, working on Civita and the Shrimp Welfare Project, respectively. I think the people in that incubation program have definitely made use of Rethink Priorities research over the years, right? To try to figure out what interventions might be promising and what organizations they want to start.
Yes, definitely. I think I guess it's not that surprising if you're thinking about starting a bunch of organizations, and a lot of Rethink Priorities work has looked at like what's very neglected and try to identify some space there. Naturally, when someone looks around the EA space and goes, okay, what needs to be started? Hey, we actually know this area that no one's really working in might be exciting, and some people take that up. I think that's true. This isn't, obviously, we're also happy to talk to people interested in starting things up based on some of our work. We've done that before. I guess, of course, I also did that when, feels like a lifetime ago when I actually was at Charity Entrepreneurship. We're talking to people who are interested in starting some of our work. I think that's generally good practice. And then in addition, I guess I would add to this that not only Charity Entrepreneurship done this, I think on the other side of my own organization, we have a special projects division, which is really just trying to get promising long-termist projects up and rolling and out the door.
Yeah. So you mentioned a bunch of examples of your research having impact from the kind of commission era of Rethink Priorities, where people are coming to you asking questions, and naturally then it has influence. Are there any interesting examples of you just putting up reports and then it influencing someone who didn't necessarily ask you to do the work?
Oh, yeah. So I guess the global health and development R&D thing I just mentioned falls in that category. That was like literally the first report Peter and I did. So this would have been not even the think tank model. This would have been the pure research. Like we were just doing a thing that we thought was promising. And this ended up leading to some changes. Obviously, I also think the invertebrate sentience kind of falls into this, though I guess there's a hedge there. This is a good example of it wasn't like immediately someone changed their grant making, but like down the line, it's pretty clear that change. This also gets to, I guess, internal assessment problems when I start to think about impact of the organization. So something like that led to our abilities to do the follow-up work on more weight, which led to the large 1-year grant follow-up we got to do the more weight project we're doing now, which is much more in depth in assessing the philosophical and scientific literature for like more than 90 capacities for a range of species. And that all started because I think that path down there was started from our ability to do some work that people thought was high quality on a topic that no one necessarily requested.
Yeah. So, since it started in 2018, Rethink Priorities has published something like 90 research reports. Are there any that you're particularly proud of or think are particularly cool that might be worth mentioning?
This is tough. I guess I'd say the biggest problem here is I haven't been cool in a long time, if I ever was. So my judgment...
It's cool to me.
my judgment here might not be great. But yeah, I'd say that's like I'm typically, like, I guess, quite proud of the I know this sounds very cliche, but like the things I think really led to a lot of change, like a lot of impact in the world. So there's some particularly, I think, novel research. Maybe I think some of the work thinking about cultivated meat, where we're just trying to use some interesting forecasting techniques, but it's not necessarily the techniques or things like that. It's really just like, did this really impact the world? Is it moving people closer to the right direction? In that respect, I actually feel really good about the invertebrate sentience work. I really feel great about some of our early work, just trying to scope out like what are the facts about the different number of animals, because no one really know, even though there are a huge number of like groups working in this space. I also feel pretty good about, though we haven't really started publishing, the very big project I keep alluding to that we're working on more weight. But we should start publishing that in the fall. But I feel like this is really going to push people towards getting a better understanding of how to make these types of decisions.
Yeah. Are there any interesting mistakes that RP has made since it was founded, which you've learned from or other people could learn from? This
is always a hard question. I would say one of the things I think we were way too slow to do was to get a professional operations team. So when we were at 7 or 8 people, like it doesn't like, oh, maybe we can keep doing this ourselves. I was like still doing the budgets, like running the finance stuff. We're getting some help through Rethink Charity, which incubated us. But I was still doing a lot of the, like, I guess, the basic operational things. And I feel that probably was not wise. We should have had professionals doing, not that I didn't make any like dramatic legal mistakes here, but I think one of the biggest constraints on growth was just like my focus, my ability to like think about the research problems or like to focus on only the things that are my comparative advantage. And we were really lucky, I think, to find Abraham Rowe, who I think is not only excellent at operations, he's our COO, but he also, it's like, mission aligned and wants to do the most good he can. And I think he's been just tremendously valuable at building our operations team.
Yeah. With so many people joining, has it been challenging maybe to provide enough onboarding and mentorship and, really effective management for everyone who's potentially starting in this job and that doesn't completely know what they're doing yet?
Yeah. So again, I'd say I think our operations team is one of the strengths of our organization, and that we take a very deliberate approach to bringing people on board. Usually the first couple of weeks before getting any like, oh yeah, you need to do this direct research project. They're set up to make sure they have the like basic setup where they get through like all the HR stuff, getting like legally set up, finance stuff like that, and then this smoothly transitions into the particulars of their role, which we have everyone go through process before. You have all the managers of new staff go through a process of figuring out like, well, this is going to be before people come on board. And we also, we have I guess, again, not at all unique to us. We try to have a cap on the number of people any given person is managing, so that it's not the case that someone just feels overwhelmed, can't really address the needs of their new staff. And we also try to make out time, I guess, when new staff start, just to like have extra meetings with them to make sure they check in, make sure they're doing okay. I think those type of things have been really useful. Again, nothing really there novel, but I think in some senses you like don't reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely, yeah. It sounds like maybe rather than making things more challenging, it's in some ways gotten easier as the organization has gotten larger, because you've been able to specialize in the skills that are your greatest strength, and maybe like double down on improving those, and leave it, you can potentially pass off other tasks to other people.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true over the last few months. I think we hired Kieran Greig to lead our strategy work, which had, I guess, up until that point, largely been driven by Peter, myself, and David Moss, who's our principal research manager, like trying to do this while also taking on our normal managing responsibilities. Having someone full-time in that role has helped a ton. Similarly, Peter and I have recently hired executive research assistants, and I feel fantastic about this decision. I can't imagine going back at this point to a world where I didn't have a assistant. And this has allowed me to focus more of my attention on the things I think that I actually have a comparative advantage on, and I guess less time trying to like manage my calendar or do certain types of responses to emails, so getting through Google Doc comments or that type of thing. But generally, being able to specialize as we've grown, I think has been really helpful. Though there's, of course, the counterpoint of something like trying not to make sure we don't silo too much, particularly given I think we have a pretty broad mission. We want to take the techniques or things that are working from different parts of the organization and make sure everyone knows, like, oh yeah, just learn from each other and learn like what works and what hasn't worked.
Yeah. Yeah, with an organization that I suppose is looking into has kind of four reasonably different programs, how often do you bring everyone together? Or is it maybe more kind of four somewhat different organizations that don't necessarily need to super coordinate between them?
Yeah, so I guess in the day-to-day sense, there doesn't be that much coordination. I think, as I mentioned, I want to learn from how operationally, like what works, what management things work. How do you? Oh, this was really useful in the hiring round. We should use this process. But like day to day, I don't think the animal welfare department, the long-term department, don't necessarily need to talk to each other that much. That said, we do have like monthly team meetings. We have regular socials. We have manager socials or manager meetings where people talk to each other, like exchange stories. And similarly, I think actually in about a month, we're having a full team retreat. The first time, I guess, in person full team retreat. In a couple of years.
It's gonna be big.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bigger than the last time we had full team retreat previously. But throughout the year, we also had individual team retreats. So I've actually been to a few. I went to the Global Health and Development Retreat in Frankfurt about a month ago, and then the Animal Welfare Retreat earlier this year. But yeah, so I think this type of coordination where everyone gets together, we probably want to do it at least once a year, and then like more regularly having like just conversations remotely.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about, careers in global priorities research and Rethink, because I imagine there could be plenty of people in the audience who are thinking, maybe that'd be interesting working at Rethink one day, or another organization doing similar work. Are there any particular things that you look for in a candidate in their CV or in interviews that are an indicator that would be a good fit for the organization or the kind of work? Yeah,
so I can answer the CV question pretty easily because I give so little weight to CVs or traditional credentials. This isn't to say, of course, there won't be exceptions. Maybe you need to hire a lawyer. You need someone to actually admitted to the bar. But to the first approximation, like I'm not really that concerned with the CV. I think this is both in some sense like, oh, is this the right thing to be selecting? But then also experience of like, if we gave more weight to the CV early on, is this actually useful for seeing who actually gets through to later rounds? And I think we found that's not necessarily true. As for the broader question on what types of, I guess, skills or traits we find that's useful, this is really hard to answer at a general level. I guess not very surprisingly, I find people who can think very critically about a given topic really helpful to getting through our hiring process. People who are pretty skeptical of things, just willing to consider the arguments for and against any given position. These types of traits come through, of course, and for a lot of our roles, quantitative skills end up being really helpful. I guess it never really hurts to be able to do this type of thing. And I guess also just some broad scientific and statistical literacy ends up being really helpful as well. But these are like really high level, so I don't think I have anything particularly novel. There's not like a one cool trick to get hired by Rethink Priorities.
Yeah. Well, how do you screen people then if you're not using the CVs? Are you doing something like work tests, or maybe reading people's prior published works online or papers or so on?
Yeah. So I guess we'd say we're pretty work test focused. So initially, usually in application, there's initial prompts you have to respond to. We can look at these prompts and assess how well we think people did on them. We might set some bar as people get through that. And we often have either an interview next or a skills assessment. They might flip order depending on the particular round. But looking at how people do on those types of things relative to how they do on prior work. Of course, there are exceptions here. Maybe someone is particularly exceptional. Maybe they have, when the initial prompts, we actually sometimes do have a link out to some particular aspect of your work. For example, in our hiring round earlier this year, we were looking for a welfare researcher who's done some particular quantitative things, and we were looking for, show some evidence of your statistical ability. You have to link to a paper you've actually produced, and we're going to walk through it later, possibly in the interview. Like that type of thing ends up being really helpful. But even then, I think it's not so much like the rigor of the particular paper you put out, or certainly not the prestige of the particular paper you have put out, but more your ability to actually solve problems.
Do you do interviews with people where you kind of give them puzzles or see how they think through a difficult problem on their feet in order to see whether they analyze problems in a way that you like?
In some senses, I feel like half of the questions are asking people hard questions and seeing how they think through their feet, but I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Maybe you mean something closer to like some of those I think some creativity puzzles, or maybe the more programming challenge.
No, actually not so much. Yeah, I don't super like the Fermi estimate thing is now super overplayed. But I'm more thinking, give people a challenging research question, then say, how would you begin to approach this question? How would you break it down? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I guess without getting too spoilery for future interviews, I do think this is something I think is valuable. I think there are times where one of the best things you could do in an interview is to state a hard problem and say, literally, what do you think about this? And just like stop talking and see what they say. That type of thing can be really helpful. Just not giving direction on why you think, like if you have particular beliefs about this, why you think that, and then trying to see who can come up with the best considerations and the most numerous considerations about one way or another, how to assess this type of problem.
Do you find that most of the people you hire have a pretty large familiarity with the existing body of ideas and published work in effective altruism, or are many of them just coming from outside that intellectual circle?
I'd say, I guess I would back up and say I don't have a good reference class to compare it to, but I do think it's a significant amount of people who have some familiarity with the space. Of course, this depends a lot on the particular role you're going to do. For some position, it's much more relevant. If you're going to read strategy stuff, it often matters having a good handle on what types of things are already happening or what type of things have already been written. But this isn't to say that someone who's more new to the space isn't capable of analyzing these things. Or it's certainly not to say that someone more new to the space isn't capable of learning the same type of things. I don't want to weight too heavily, or we don't want to weight too heavily on existing knowledge when that type of thing might be outcompeted pretty quickly by someone just like spent 3 weeks reading what the existing literature is. So this is always a tricky challenge, trying to figure out how to grade people who who have heard of, like who've been around the space for years versus someone who might have only heard of things a few weeks ago or saw our job ad on Twitter, for example, which is a real thing that happens. Trying to assess, well, where are they now? Where would you expect them to be in 6 months? Where do you expect them to be in 3 years?
Yeah. So, for listeners, what sorts of roles might you plausibly be hiring for through the end of 2022?
Yeah, so as I said, we just did a gigantic hiring round. So first up,
maybe will it slow down a little bit in the next few months?
Not a lot. So I think the nearest soon hires, particularly I guess on my side of the organization, first and foremost, I think would be the work investigations work. So I mentioned more weight work. So this is a type of question where like more foundational, thinking about How should you assess interspecies comparisons? Well, these same type of questions come up on like, how should you deal with cross-college comparisons? How should you make decisions under certainty? How should you think about indirect effects? These type of questions are like really big picture things. And I think we're probably going to be looking to hire for people in that type of, I guess it's funny to say that type of role because it's really broad, but looking to hire people to work on those type of questions sometime early next year. And for other topics, I honestly don't have that many things to say to you right now because we just finished the giant hiring round. There are a couple of things. Right. There's definitely things where I think if we had more funding, particularly maybe on the survey team, we might be interested in hiring more people, but not like at the moment.
Yeah. Well, what about on the operations side?
I don't think we have anything imminent on the operations side. We just, again, hired a number of people on the operations side. Operations associate, we hired CPA, we hired some people to work on special projects to like actually implement things. And we don't have any imminent things coming, though I do think there's a number of roles we may hire for next year. Definitely no promises, but things looking to possibly more comm staff, possibly more fundraising help. But yeah, these are things on our radar, but no firm plans right now.
Yeah. It might be a bit too early to be able to answer this question, but where are people tended to go to work after being at Rethink Priorities?
Yeah, I think it's a little early.
Premature, yeah.
I think a few people have left the organization, and a few have gone to finish their graduate studies. So like that's actually by quantity, that's probably the number one answer. And then after that, a few people have gone on to work at other organizations. Particularly, I think Jason Shoecraft is at Open Philanthropy now.
Yeah, well, there's also Luisa Rodriguez worked with you. I was asking this question in part because it's in part because of the work that Luisa published while she was at Rethink, though, that we decided to make her an offer. She published this really interesting work on risk from nuclear war that we've talked about with her on the 80,000 Hours podcast.
Yeah,
and I guess I imagine for many people working at Rethink Priorities, especially if they're able to publish the work the research that they're doing in some form, it really helps to build up this portfolio to demonstrate what they're capable of doing that they can then show to any other potential people who might hire them in future.
Yeah, I think that's right. Also, I feel very guilty for not mentioning Luisa.
Okay. Well, maybe you just assumed that, of course, everyone would know. Well, you just mentioned the issue of potentially being funding constrained on hiring. If you did manage to get more donations, what would you potentially do with additional funding on the margin? Yeah,
so first and foremost, I think we use money to, if we have the money for the purpose, to fund our survey team. I think they could use about $3 million from now through the end of 2023, just with the current team. And they could use new hires. I think we presently have to turn down a lot of opportunities working with groups because we don't have the staff capacity and we don't have the funds to expand our team. A lot of this work is on meta work or long-termism, I think primarily like in those spaces, and we just don't have the capacity to take on projects. I think it's like particularly unfortunate. Like there's some like tension here between like trying to get commission work and a lot of people need our work. When they request something of us, it might be like really time sensitive. So we can't hire if like we don't have time to hire and we don't have staff in place to like make it happen. So I think that's a bit of a tension. So funding to support that team would be like really useful, really desirable. And then I mentioned more of your investigations. So we'd like to build out staff to take on those questions I mentioned. They probably could take something like $1 million a year over the next 2 years. And then animal welfare, we could probably spend another $2 million or $3 million over that period on policy, on additional wild animal welfare work, on additional farm animal welfare researchers, invertebrates. And I'd say like invertebrates and wild animal welfare are particularly challenging to fundraise for. And I guess generally speaking, we could use some more generous researchers if like we have unrestricted funding. This is a particular area where like we do have a lot of questions where there are cross-cutting that could fit into, say, worldview investigation type work. But there's sometimes other times where you just need an extra person on hand who's not necessarily committed to working on some particular cause area. But we have the funding to take care of them no matter what. So that's another area where we would spend additional funds. And then I guess finally, global health and development, we could probably use about, I'd say for that, we're probably thinking more about doing some, I guess, not exactly consultancy work. And we could probably use at least $200,000 or $300,000 a year for that type of work where we're taking on projects that might be more think tanky than consultancy.
I see. Yeah, well, we've come up on time, but a final question. What's a particularly surprising thing you've learned while working at Rethink?
Undoubtedly, the most surprising thing I've learned to Rethink was the number of wild-caught shrimp. It was just, It was so mind-blowing that like when Daniela originally computed them, she said the numbers are like really large, and I didn't believe them, so I computed them again. And I saw the number, and I was like, I also don't believe this. So I ran it again, and this is one of those things where your expectations were just like it has to be smaller than this, and it wasn't. I guess this gets to the big picture question about there's just a huge number of animals relative to the number of humans alive right now.
Yeah, it's a big world for better or worse. My guest today has been Marcus Davis. Thanks so much for coming on 80K After Hours, Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a great time. And definitely do it again.
If you're interested in learning more about the work Marcus is doing, you should check out rethinkpriorities.org. We'll add a link to the show notes. You could also check out Rethink Priorities' leadership statement on the FTX situation and read about how it might impact their long-term financial outlook and ability to keep growing. We'll link to that in the show notes too. And as I mentioned in the intro, you can listen to Rob's thoughts on the FTX situation on our original 80,000 Hours podcast feed. All right, audio mastering and technical editing for this episode by Milo Maguire and Ben Cordell. Full transcripts and an extensive collection of links to learn more are available on our site and put together by Katie Moore. And I produce the show. Thanks for listening.